A banker at one of the largest banks in America was drowning in personal debt, so a smaller bank's lending chief offered him a way out, and in exchange, that banker kept approving loans he had every reason to know were doomed. This isn't the story you've heard about Penn Square Bank. This is the part that stayed buried under the bigger headlines about bailouts and too big to fail. By the early 1980s, John Lytle was a vice president at Continental Illinois, running the division responsible for buying energy loans from Penn Square Bank in Oklahoma City. On paper, his job was simple: evaluate the loans Penn Square wanted to sell, and only approve the ones that made financial sense for Continental. In practice, prosecutors would later allege Lytle was approving loans almost automatically, waving through deals without properly checking whether borrowers could repay or whether the collateral backing them was worth anything close to what was claimed. Why would a senior banker at a major institution do that? Because according to federal investigators, he was being paid to. Penn Square's energy lending chief, Bill Patterson, had built his reputation on charisma and relationships, the kind of banker who closed deals over beers and handshakes rather than spreadsheets. And prosecutors alleged Patterson used that same style of relationship building on the man responsible for buying his bank's riskiest loans. The arrangement, as laid out in a later indictment, was specific. Patterson personally lent Lytle more than $500,000, at rates far better than Lytle could have gotten anywhere else. When Lytle still couldn't cover his debts, Patterson went further, personally guaranteeing a loan of over $500,000 at another bank just to bail Lytle out. But here's where it gets genuinely clever, in the worst way. Regulators eventually started circling this relationship. So, prosecutors alleged the men needed a way to make the payoff disappear on paper. A Penn Square customer named Jerry Sturgis stepped in and repurchased Lytle's stake in a drilling exploration investment at a price wildly inflated above what it was actually worth. Lytle used the proceeds from that inflated buyback to quietly pay off the loan Patterson had guaranteed for him. On paper, it looked like an ordinary investment transaction. In reality, prosecutors said, it was a laundering mechanism, a way to move money to Lytle without it ever looking like what it actually was. And what did Continental get in return for all of this? Loan after loan approved with little real scrutiny, feeding directly into the same reckless energy lending machine that would eventually help collapse Penn Square Bank and nearly take Continental Illinois down with it. When Penn Square failed in July 1982, and Continental's exposure to its bad energy loans became public, the initial story the country got was about institutional recklessness, aggressive lending, weak oversight, an oil boom that turned to bust. That story wasn't wrong, but it left out the fact that at least one of the people responsible for approving those loans may have been financially compromised the entire time. The legal reckoning took years, and it was messier than most people realize. Patterson was first tried in Oklahoma on charges related to defrauding Penn Square itself, and in September 1984, after a 3-week trial, a jury acquitted him on every count. But on that exact same day, a grand jury in Illinois indicted him again, this time specifically over the scheme to defraud Continental built around his relationship with Lytle. Patterson fought the second case as double jeopardy, arguing he was being tried twice for the same conduct. The courts disagreed, ruling the Oklahoma and Illinois cases involved legally distinct schemes. Eventually, in 1988, both men ran out of road. Lytle and Patterson pleaded guilty to criminal charges tied to the kickback scheme, and both were sentenced to prison terms. Their defense had argued that Continental's own aggressive push into energy lending was as much to blame as anything Lytle personally did. That he was a convenient scapegoat for a bank that wanted the growth just as badly as Penn Square did. The court didn't buy it as a full defense, but the argument wasn't baseless either. Continental Illinois had chased energy lending hard, and Lytle wasn't the only person there who should have been asking harder questions. That's really the uncomfortable core of this story. It's easy to tell the Penn Square collapse as a story about reckless institutions and bad judgment at scale. Too much lending, not enough oversight, an industry high on its own boom. That version is true, and it's the version that got turned into a doctrine, a bailout, and a phrase that still shapes banking policy today. But underneath that institutional story was a much smaller, much more human one. A banker with money problems, a lender willing to exploit them, and a scheme deliberately built to look legitimate right up until it wasn't. Billions of dollars in losses, a near collapse of one of the country's largest banks, and part of the machinery behind it was a few $100,000 changing hands quietly between two men who knew exactly what they were doing. The bigger the collapse, the easier it is to blame the system instead of the people inside it. Penn Square and Continental Illinois show why that's rarely the whole truth. If you want more stories like this, the human corruption hiding inside the institutional headlines, subscribe. New corporate scandal every day.